Good afternoon from Smith School of Business. My name is Neil Bierce, and I'll be serving as moderator for today's session. We have a wonderful session in front of us, all on the topic of building team resiliency. So I will keep the introductions short, and we'll hear from Dr. Shawna O'Grady very soon. Just a reminder for everybody, you can rest at ease throughout the presentation. We will be sending a full recording of this as a video file to everyone who registered. Probably in the next couple days. So early next week, you can expect an email to the same email address that you used to register. And also take note that you can tell any colleagues that were unable to attend today's event that they'd be able to view that as well. So please feel free to share that recording with anyone that you wish. And we also have the ability for you to sign up to receive future invitations to these events. We run these events through our Smith School of Business Insights platform once a month or once a quarter. We have a few coming up in the next few weeks. And please feel free to sign up for invitations to future webinars and white papers authored by our faculty here at Smith School of Business on any number of business topics, including general management, leadership, strategy, innovation, and more topics just like that. So you can visit ssb.ca/webinars. There's a very easy form to fill out there, and you'll be first to know about our next event. Throughout the session, we invite questions. Please feel free to ask the question whenever it comes to mind rather than waiting until the end of the presentation. It helps us on this side in terms of moderating the questions, as I'm sure you can imagine. We have in excess of 500 people joining us today, so keep that in mind as you send questions through. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can at the end of the session, and if any are particularly relevant, we often will use those types of questions to plan future sessions and future articles on our Insight platform, so please feel free to ask them at any moment. You can use either the chat window or the Q&A window on the right-hand side of your Event Center screen, and my colleague Shin Hee will be helping triage some of those questions today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's session leader, Dr. Shawna O'Grady. She's an Associate Professor of Organizational Behavior here at Queen's University's Smith School of Business in Kingston, Ontario. She's an experienced team facilitator and served as Director of Team Facilitation with our Queen's Executive MBA program for 13 years. As many of you know, she is a very popular session leader on many of our Queen's Executive Education offerings. She consults widely for a variety of clients in the private and public sectors in the areas of team building, human resource management, leading change, thinking and problem-solving styles, and international business. Dr. O'Grady is widely quoted in the media and regularly addresses industry and academic audiences in Canada and around the world. So we are very delighted that she can join us here today. With that, have a great session.
Well, thank you, Neil, for that introduction, and thank you to all of you. I see many names on the list of people who I've seen in other sessions, so it's great that you can join us today. I'm really pleased to be here today to discuss one of my favorite topics, building team resiliency. A resilient team is one that resolves challenges quickly and sustains its performance over time. Let me begin by saying that there's never been a better time, in my opinion, for teams. In a recent study, 9 out of 10 companies surveyed agreed that the problems confronting them are now so complex that teams are needed to solve the issues. Issues like technology, globalization, diversity, all issues that I think many of you are probably facing. They also agreed that their ability to develop and manage teams is absolutely essential for their future competitiveness. What I think is interesting is that it used to be that we had to convince people in organizations about the importance of teams. It certainly doesn't seem like the case anymore. In fact, what does your typical organizational day look like? Are you spending a lot of time in teams? What I'm finding most interesting in the area of teams these days is that when you take a look at the Ernst & Young study that I'm looking at right now, is that on average, senior executives are reporting that they're spending about 50% of their time in teams and team meetings. In fact, what's particularly interesting is that this has just ballooned by 50% or more over the past 2 decades. Now, I'm a huge supporter of teams, but for the right reasons. What we have to be careful of is, are we spending too much time on teams? One of the things I'd like to start off the webinar is addressing exactly how do you calibrate the level of collaboration needed in your organization. Is it too much? When should you be using a team and when shouldn't you? So I'd like to start off by helping provide some insights around that. Secondly, I'll share 5 steps to building and sustaining resilient teams. Then, how do you actually keep virtual teams that many organizations are using cohesive? One of the most difficult things in the virtual team area is building trust, helping people to really feel that sense of trust across their teammates. Then, trust can actually get broken, whether you're in a virtual team or any other type of team. What do you do when you want to repair a breach? There's a set of questions as well as a process that I'd like to walk you through. And finally, how do you know when a team has actually outlived its usefulness? We'll go through a couple of key areas that you can identify when the team really shouldn't be working together anymore. Well, let's start off with the first area, which is all about calibrating the level of collaboration. Many organizations are in a difficult position these days because they're caught really wondering how much collaboration is needed and how much is too much. I like to start off any discussion around teams with, do you really need a team? How do you know? Well, I always begin with the work itself. Is it complex or is it simple? The fact that we're in the middle of a U.S. political race for president reminds me of the former candidate, Ross Perot. Some of you will be old enough to remember that. He said, if you see a snake, kill it. Don't appoint a committee on snakes. Well, that sounds a little bit harsh, but it certainly captures the point. I remember when I said that in one of my previous sessions on an executive program, and one of the women came running up and she said, Shawna, I didn't know that you were actually against killing animals. And I thought that it was quite funny because my point was really all about the fact that it really highlighted the fact that some work is independent. It requires one person to take a quick decision. So that's what I liked about that Ross Perot quote. Really, that's where we need to start. Is the work interdependent? Is it complex, or is it simple? Anything that's complex, unique, requiring innovation, those are all great times when we should be teaming or getting a team of people together, requiring a lot of mind power of many different people. But somehow we've lost that. We're gathering the team together when we don't really need teams. Individuals are beginning to feel like they're wasting their time. How many times have you sat around in a meeting when you're wondering what you're doing there? You should start by asking, do we have an expert? Tax, legal, HR issues are good examples. It's awkward for a tax expert to have to sit listening to another individual's interpretation of what they might think are interesting issues around the law when they know that it has to move in a certain direction. Why don't we let that individual take over? Do we have time? Another important criteria. Agility matters so much in business these days. Often we need to move urgently. One person may need to take a decision just to keep the business in business. One thing's for sure, you only have time to bring together the expertise that you need, and no one else. Mercy invitations are not good. You might decide to invite Wilbur, knowing he's not needed, and he ends up derailing the whole meeting. You'll need to be really firm on this. Keep the team as small as you absolutely need and no bigger. One of my clients has 4 women that he takes with him to every team meeting. They sit looking rather bored in the team meeting. Worse yet, the other team members spend their time trying to figure out what these other 4 do. It's problematic and unproductive. Another client has 18 people on a conference call, yet the director that I'm working with told me clearly only 5 are needed. The rest are wasted resources. Well, we have to begin by also thinking about, do you need a group or a team? One of my favorite definitions comes from The Wisdom of Teams, a classic book in the area. What is a group? Well, a group is a set of individuals who rely on a set of individuals, or a sum rather of individual bests for their performance. Mild coordination across those individuals is absolutely all that's required. If that's what you have, you may be able to think of committees you've worked on, whole departments. That's perfect. You may not need to put the resources into forming a team. What's the difference between that and a team? Well, a team, as you can see from the definition, is a small number of people, so size matters, with complementary skills, who are, and here's the key, committed to a common purpose or mission, a clear set of performance goals that support that mission, and a common working approach or a set of norms that they'll come back and hold each other accountable. What's the main difference between a group and a team? The level of alignment. A good way to think about the difference between a group and a team is all-star hockey players. Think of choosing a set of all-star hockey players, and those individual bests never quite come together. They may actually be the best technical players, but unless they actually they're aligned around a common purpose or strategy, they may never actually perform as well as technically less good players. It's really whether or not they come into alignment that makes the difference. What makes team members want to align and commit to a common purpose or talk through their common strategy with each other or the other members? Well, individuals like to work with other people that they think highly of. One of the biggest fears that people have when they work in a team is that they'll be the best one on the team, or that they'll have to do all the work. How many times have you been on a team where that may have actually happened? Often it's because the team does not take the time out to produce that level of alignment. Have you ever heard the statement, there's no I in team? Well, I disagree. I think what people mean when they bring up the statement, there's no I in team, is that you should have a positive team playing attitude. And I definitely agree with that. But when I hear there's no I in team, I think individuals who are strong opinions, strong individual perspectives. And I would definitely want to see that on any team that I was part of. In fact, the best teams that I work with have all of that. But those strong individuals come into alignment. They make the absolute best teams that I've ever seen. Don't mistake alignment for agreement, though. Agreement may mean that the team has to reduce itself down to a level that the team would otherwise not be comfortable with. Alignment means that you commit to something that you're comfortable with when you walk out the door after everyone has had chance to put their opinion forward, that strong opinion. And then you can live and commit to the outcome when you walk out the door. The difficulty is when teams do not have a fulsome discussion in the team room and the real decision gets made outside, either before the people ever walk into the team meeting or after the team meeting has actually taken place. That's problematic. We have to be careful that your best individuals don't fall into something called collaborative overload. Recent research has found that up to 1/3 of value-added collaborations come from only 3 to 5% of all employees. Also, research by Ning Li has found that a single individual in the team can drive team performance more than all other members combined. We call these individuals extra milers. These are individuals who frequently contribute beyond the scope of their role. If we're not careful, these individuals can end up dissatisfied, disengaged, and feeling like they're doing too much. That's the difficulty that we're finding in teams sometimes if we're not careful about calibrating the right level of collaboration. Here's how this works. There are 3 types of collaborative resources in organizations. First, what we call informational. This is basically someone's expertise, their knowledge, their skills. The good news about informational collaborative resources is that you can document them. You can send someone some information, and it can be put down on paper. It can be passed on more easily, in a sense, than the other 2 types. Social is your position in a network. Access. You can use this to open doors, help someone make a contact. Personal has to do with your time and energy. What's interesting about this is that there are gender differences. The evidence is showing that women are more likely to experience emotional exhaustion than men because they're more apt to use the 3rd type, personal collaborative resources. They're more likely to be contributing their personal energy and time. So what do we do about this? How are you able to really begin to allocate collaborative resources within your organization in a better way? It's great that people want to collaborate. It's great that they want to spend time on teams. And it's great that we don't have to really argue that teams matter anymore. But we need to get it right. We don't want to waste resources. So what can we do? One thing that you can do is that you can encourage women to invest differently. Rather than simply put their time into the personal energy invested, they can think about other types of collaborative resources, the other 2 types that may be able to be invested more quickly. In hockey, we give credit for assists as well as goals. In organizations, maybe we should be thinking about giving credit for the time that people are putting into helping other people, not just the outcome of collaboration. At Dropbox, many of you probably are using Dropbox, they decided to cancel meetings for 2 weeks and see what meetings, team meetings, that they actually needed. If we did this in many organizations, maybe we'd find that we don't need most of them. We need to give permission to our employees to say no. Maybe they should only be on 1 team, 2 teams max. But right now, they're not feeling that they can say no when they're asked to be on 3, 4, 5 teams. Or maybe they should redirect when they're being asked to participate. Here's another person who might be the right person for that team. In social media, internal sites, maybe they should be told to put the snooze button on, not answer. Set criteria for collaboration. Only participate in projects that excite you, that you're passionate about. Forget the rest. Not projects that are exhausting. And why don't we put people whose work is interdependent beside each other? Then again, maybe they don't want to be beside each other. Well, the good news is people do want to collaborate. Your job is to ensure that you get the right people on your teams and that they want to collaborate with each other. There's a tremendous amount of work being done about who is appropriate for our teams. Let me touch on just some of it. There are two characteristics that we evaluate people on: likability, or warmth, and competence, or effectiveness. There's many ways we could talk about those two characteristics. There was some great research that took a look at these two characteristics, asking 10,000 managers to who they would like to work with. Well, if we use this 2x2 framework to take a look at these two characteristics, it leaves us with, up in the upper right-hand corner, people who are both likable and competent. Don't we all want more of these people on our teams, in our organizations? They're lovable stars. Similarly, down in the left-hand corner, people who are neither likable nor competent. We don't want those people on teams or in organizations. Those two are pretty simple. It's the other two that are more interesting. Over on the right corner, we've all met them, haven't we? The competent jerks. These are people who are technically competent. They can do the work. However, they often cause problems for others. They are the type that may make others not want to engage in the team. You say something and they insult you or run you down. They may not even know they're doing it, but somehow they make it uncomfortable for other people on the team. Then there's the lovable fools. Ooh, we like these people. They're not very competent, though. They don't deliver. And no matter what, it's difficult, though, because they are just so likable. So the real question becomes, who would you rather work with? That's what 10,000 managers were asked. Well, what was interesting about this study is that the managers chose the fool. Does that surprise you? Subsequent research from the Journal of Applied Social Psychology found that although we love the fool, we don't respect him. Eventually, fools demoralize teams. Yet, they're not the first individuals on teams that we tend to have a problem with. Jerks are. Are there types of jerks? Of course there are. Sure, some really don't know how they're affecting other people. So when you tell them, they can change with clear behavioral expectations. One guy, one of my favorite stories, was an individual I worked with who began suddenly throwing pens at other people. Could he change? Sure. But we needed to be clear, stop throwing pens, and in addition, some consequences that if he continued to, what that meant. See, lots of times in organizations, the performance management system doesn't always back it up. Once it was made clear, it can't be a safety issue for the others on the team, but also, if you continue to do that, the organization won't tolerate it. That's actually an interesting message for many people, but they may not have been told. So great teams have clarity across the norms of the team, but also the organization's performance management system backs it up. Another female CEO that I worked with used to get stressed. She'd begin swearing uncontrollably. The senior team would close down. With feedback, she learned controlling it was essential to her success within the team and as a leader. You can tell right away whether someone will change their behavior and how they receive the feedback, I found. Is it their fault or is it the team's fault? When people begin to say it's everyone else's fault, you usually know you're not likely to get a big change. If they accept that 6 other people on the team think they are giving them some effective feedback, you usually have a pretty good chance. In my experience, teams tolerate fools longer because they like them. Sadly, it's tough to train competence in the time of the team's project, so this is something that needs to be addressed quickly. Resilient teams address their challenges quickly. They resolve challenges quickly, and it sustains positive performance over time. To do that, they need to remove negative influences right away. What seems clear is that there's a fair range of behavior people will tolerate on teams, but we need a base level of both likability and competence. There's a huge range teams will accept. You can't go too far off either, or the team eventually rejects the individual. You have to be careful not to get rid of your jerks, or should I say, your dissenters, too quickly. Some people mix up those two terms. Be careful with that because research shows that dissenters are very productive for teams. Be careful mixing the term, though, with something Will Phelps has called bad apples. Will Phelps did a study about bad apples where he injected Nick. Nick was a name of an individual who went into otherwise productive teams. The teams were rolling along just fine. Nick was introduced to behave badly. 3 types of bad behavior. One type was Nick as an insulting jerk. The second type, Nick was a chronic complainer. Nothing anyone did would ever work. We've all met that kind of person. The third type was a freeloader. Nick put his feet up on the desk and wouldn't do anything. 2 interesting results came out of the bad apple study. First of all, the previously high-performing teams dropped their performance by 30 to 40%. And the second finding, equally interesting in my opinion, was that the other team members, some of the other team members began acting like Nick. So there's a contagion element. What does this say? Again, we need to act quickly to make sure that anybody who begins to infect a team negatively, that we do something to remove that bad influence or negative influence. Resilient teams resolve challenges quickly. That's how they sustain their positive performance over time. Dissenters, though, these are people that you may be on a team and they bring something up just as you think the team meeting is over. Another way to look at something, an innovative idea. And you think, I thought we were getting out of here. But what's interesting about dissenters is that unlike bad apples, they actually make your team higher quality decisions. Because even if they are wrong about the course that you're pursuing, they actually add a more intense discussion. They make you pay attention to a wider set of information. These individuals are the best thing for a team. They elevate the productivity and performance of teams. We want to keep our dissenters. They're not jerks at all. These are people that are the best thing for a team. So a good thing for our teams. Well, a resilient team helps us to resolve challenges and has the ability to sustain performance over time. When asked what the most important area to focus on to build a resilient team, it's easy for me to answer. It's focus on building a strong foundation. We want our resilient teams to have a really strong base so that they're proactive. The best way to build resiliency is to make sure that teams are set up well in the first place. We've identified 5 steps to building a resilient team. Sadly, most organizations jump straight to step 3. They worry about getting teams focused on the task getting in on the roles, assignments, and setting them up with the heavy workload that they're usually assigned. Now that's important, but not until you've actually been able to set a very strong foundation around why is each member on the team. The first level is all about building respect for the strengths of each of the team members. Without that, team members won't trust why each member has a place on the team and why they're there in terms of how can you use each team member to advantage. Secondly, how can you build that level of alignment around our expectations of each other? What's our mission, charter, the goals to help us reach the mission, and what kind of expectations do we have of one another to make us successful? That's always something we can come back to. Once we've done that, we can then assign people to the best roles that'll help us take advantage of expertise, assign a great process for how we can get there around decision making, and also how we might want to work together effectively, and organize the team so that it can be most efficient. How often do we need to meet? What kind of meetings? Should they be face-to-face meetings? Should we work virtually at times? Or should there be a combination? And also, we need to sustain our performance. You cannot have a team that will be resilient if the members do not come back to build in review through team debriefing. What's working? What's not? What can we do better? And ultimately tie this into celebrating our success and ultimately holding ourselves accountable through the performance management system and measurements that we set up. No team will ever be high performing without building in accountability to its system. If you do that, you'll end up with the whole greater than the sum of its parts and ultimately success. Sustaining resilient teams is all about debriefing of projects and meetings. A couple of useful tools are 3 questions. What went wrong? What went well? And what can we do to improve? You may have seen the Stop, Start, Continue framework. What should we stop doing that's not being effective? What should we start doing that could make us more effective? And what should we pat ourselves on the back with that is working well, and let's continue to reinforce and celebrate. We should document our lessons learned to make sure that we're continuing to build upon our lessons over time. Now, building a team is one part of it. Coaching and follow-up is equally important. 2 things coaches can do to add effectiveness is a team member review to help provide effective and honest feedback against a set of norms of behavior, and then, of course, to resolve conflicts along the way, a healthy part of any effective team. There's many other areas that coaching can also be highly effective to build the team to higher levels of performance and to increase resiliency. Well, as the world becomes increasingly global, more and more teams are virtual in nature. A virtual team is any team that has 2 additional characteristics. They're physically dispersed, which means this could be geographically or organizationally. Some of the virtual teams that I work with have some of their members in the same building, but they may be on another floor. This could be one way that a team is still virtual. They could be in another building, or they could be in another country. It could be across the country. That's why I say physically dispersed as opposed to geographically dispersed. The second characteristic is that they interact primarily through electronic means. While the results are mixed in the academic research, part of the reason is that we don't always have the best measures of virtual teams. One thing we know is that there are many benefits to virtual teams. We can tap into the best talent globally, which is ideal to handle the many and complex issues we face today. Some of the technologies allow everyone to add in their comments divergently, and then also to come together through other types of technology to vote so they can produce faster decision times, and the team can work 24/7 in parallel. So people can actually love this type of way of working, increasing team member flexibility, efficiency. There's no real estate, so it can lower costs or minimize real estate. You don't have to physically be present. Recently, one of the teams I was working with, the team leader sent out a poll requesting team member availability. One of the women on the team noted 2 times that she could meet for a face-to-face meeting, and 9 times she could actually call in, highlighting the incredible flexibility. Some difficulties? Well, when we see people, we do a size up. Sure, it may make for incorrect assumptions, but people usually correct these over time when they see each other face-to-face. Without face-to-face, we can't do this, so we tend to replace it by wondering about people, or worse, we fill in the blanks, our version of what their intent actually is. There are fewer nonverbal cues in virtual teams, so this doesn't really help us, producing more likelihood for conflict. People tend to want to share less if they don't trust the other person. These can be some of the difficulties. All of this makes it tougher to build trust. It can also be tough to stay motivated when you're working on your own. There can be an out-of-sight, out-of-mind effect that makes it tough for people to get the work done sometimes. Not everyone, but some people may have that difficulty. So what can you do? I'll focus on keeping virtual teams cohesive. Here are 4 strategies that you might focus on. I'll briefly touch on 4 listed here today, going through each one. The first I'd like to focus on is investing in old-fashioned FaceTime. Not the Apple product, but the actual meeting, FaceTime. This is essential if you want to build a team that actually trusts each other. Our experience has been it's important to have the team come together for the initial team building component of the virtual team. If you have extra resources, you can use it to onboard members for celebrations, to discuss a tough issue, for conflicts, or other times that you may have the opportunity to come together. But really, the upfront team building to build initial trust, to have people set expectations, is the one time that it appears to be absolutely critical. Now, that's if you want the team to be able to perform at the same level as teams who are located together. To lead us into the second way that you can keep virtual teams cohesive, let me ask you a question. What are you doing right now? Chances are you're multitasking. Now, if you're like most people, you're probably doing something else while you're listening to this webinar, and that's okay. But why? Well, because you can. 82% of people work on unrelated items when they're on a conference call, for instance. And recent research shows that they also do other work in 65% of the cases. They send email in 63% of the cases. They even shop online in 21% of the cases. So I guess there are other women out there like me who have PMS, purchase more shoes, if you're wondering what PMS stands for. So what's this mean? Well, it means that the next area for keeping virtual teams cohesive is very important. You need to have a unique set of ground rules to enhance virtual cohesion. Every team needs a set of strong norms But on a virtual team, you need unique norms or ground rules. What are they? One is no multitasking. The team has to come together in those initial team building days and understand why they need a no multitasking ground rule or norm. And it's because without that, you simply will not have the focus of the team. You need to agree to use video where possible so that you can enhance the kind of connection that otherwise will not be there. We used to think mute was our friend, muting all distractions, whereas now we've learned that unmuting the distractions is key. For example, when you set up a trusting relationship during your first couple of days of team building, you learn about Sally's dog and Bob's 2 children. Later, by having some of those distractions unmuted, you can hear Sally's dog barking in the background, and it can actually be part of what you draw into the discussion. You can bring it up. It gives you a connection. You can say something about it. You can laugh about it. This makes us closer as a team when it gives us something personal to discuss during the check-in, another part of what can enhance virtual cohesion, a personal check-in led by the chair of the meeting or the team leader. Cold calling by the chair should be encouraged. Pre-work is part of every great team. It should be part of the virtual team. But then the ability to cold call any individual will definitely enhance cohesion when we know that we'll be asked to share something. Then, when something goes well, let's have a virtual pizza day, or some other way of enhancing the energy on the team. Music. And some people even will have some type of fit break or something where they do things that make them laugh and add some energy into the team meeting. What about pairing up? Some of you on virtual teams may only live a short distance from each other. Pairing up to do work face-to-face, or perhaps 2 of you are in the same location. For sure, get together and take the time. People wonder if it is too extra time to do this. Well, it's actually worth it to have the FaceTime with those individuals to build those relationships that you can, where you can. This comes down to the enhanced role of the virtual team leader. These people are extra important to the virtual team. Why? Because they'll be doing 2 things. They'll be more proactive in setting up, making sure that these meetings are extra important, and they'll also be managing the team energy and performance. They'll be doing one-on-ones, checking in to make sure that each team member is still high energy, they believe in the virtual team, and that others in the organization still value the why behind it. They'll also initiate discussion of outcomes. What are we after? What's the deliverable? Are we still on track? How far? What are the milestones? And encouraging open dialogue. Seems like this issue is not getting out on the table. Maybe we ought to have another round to ensure that each one of us says something again around this. All of those are very important. So being proactive and also ensuring that there is more structure are 2 things that the virtual team leader does. Finally, to enhance cohesion, the virtual team leader, or rather, you need to use a combination of technologies. A couple of important things to note here is that the right technology for the right issue is what we're really talking about. I've listed a number of different options, but virtual teams that never meet cannot really be high performing because some issues, like building relationships, will simply require a combination of different techniques: in-person, video conference, telephone, text perhaps between some of the people, in that order, of course, will be important. Virtual teams can use a combination. Sometimes for divergent thinking and brainstorming, you can survey people and actually enhance getting individual input, but then more efficiently for making decisions, you can use different technologies. collaboration tools for preparing reports, and yet a different tool again for scheduling meetings. You may need training, in fact you will, on the technology to get the most out of it. Well, whether your team is virtual or not, trust often breaks down. That's not unique to a virtual team. What usually breaks trust down? All these issues listed on our screens. Lack of competence, the classic freeloader who doesn't do anything. Unreliability, you don't know if someone will do it or not. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So expectations get out of alignment. The person who backstabs you, you tell them something and they share it with someone else and you didn't think they would. Could also be someone who's uncaring or out for themselves first, not the team. The me first individual. Someone who's unfair, or the sneaky individual who you're never quite sure. You share with them, but they're not very transparent. Then there's the liar, dishonest, or they aren't very ethical in your opinion. Well, repairing breaches in trust come down to many issues. It's a complex issue, but I've put down 3 questions I always think are important. Let's start with, is this an issue where trust can be repaired? Well, let's go back to the previous set of issues for a minute. What about competence issues? It's tough to train competence within the time frame of the project, I've found. They may be able to build skill, a team member, within 6 months or a year, but what about within the time frame you need them to get up to speed? That's tough to build trust and put your trust in letting someone do part of work or a project if you don't think they have the skill level. Similarly, what about the last issue on the list, the previous list? An unethical individual. One of the worst cases of that, 2 women I had in an office, one slept with the other's husband. No amount of team building or facilitation I could do is about to fix that, sadly. What if the team leader, let's move on to the second issue here, who's involved? What if the team leader is a backstabber? So it's not a colleague or a team member so much as the person leading the team. One of the teams I dealt with recently, the team leader told 3 of the team members that they would each be leading the next major project. Only one could. So imagine what happened. The other 2 felt that they had been backstabbed. So you have a decision to make in that case. Are you going to confront that issue? You could, but you need to understand that confronting someone in a position of power or authority over you will have some implications that could be different than a team where you're all at the same level. I have a blog actually on when your boss is a jerk that deals with some of these other issues. So that's something to consider that's more complicated. Many find it difficult to address issues involving breaches of trust and should get some help. So is there a need for an external coach or facilitator that could help you immensely? They can help by focusing on the resolution, keeping the issue calm. I'm always amazed when I get involved in these issues to help people, the tremendous relief that comes over people when the issue gets put out on the table, confronted effectively, and resolved. So what do? Well, keeping commitments is the quickest way to build trust in any relationship. Stephen Covey, one of my favorites. It comes back to behaviors. What I think needs to happen, whether you're the team leader, the manager, the coach, an HR facilitator, the way to move forward is to meet with each of the team members individually. Identify what behaviors have broken trust, and then what acceptable behaviors are. Clarify what's required to gain their commitment to move forward. Often it's an apology for the mistakes. Clearly, an end to the behaviors that have led to the problem are almost always necessary. And what are the new productive behaviors that must happen in the future? You need to lay all of that out. Next, you must meet with both team members to discuss the situation and align around the expectations moving forward. When you meet, the apology or apologies would take place. You would establish the clear behavioral expectations in writing, and then you would identify a follow-up date to assess progress. This alone helps people to stay on track. And let me clarify again, not all breaches may be able to be repaired. You should identify this before you move forward with that meeting. Well, some teams outlive their usefulness. How do you know when their time has come? There are 3 criteria for an effective team. Many teams start to enjoy working together and supporting and respecting each other so much they forget why we're using teams. To have an effective team, you can't forget that no organization moves toward teams unless it's getting teams hitting performance standards and teams continuing to learn and improve over time. The good news is that when teams are progressing and performing at their best level, that's when they're most satisfied. So we need all 3. If people on a team stop being committed to learning and improvement and continuing to progress with their performance standards, then the team has really stopped its level of usefulness. And that's what I've found, is that second item is that we sometimes see some or all of the team members may lose that level of commitment. We need to assess the team's usefulness at that point. Secondly, the project may have finished, or the nature of the work may have changed. Those are the key times when I find that we need to assess, has the innovation occurred? Has the team come to the end of the complexity of its work? Enjoying working together is great, but we need to make sure that the team is still continuing to produce and continuing to move forward and innovate and improve. Well, let me stop there and take some questions from all of you and see what you've come up with that might be of interest based on what I've said. I see I've got a set of questions here. Let me start with the first one. All right, you mentioned that you need FaceTime for virtual teams for team building at the front end. What if we don't have any money? Well, that's a question that I often hear, and let me mention that you don't have to begin with FaceTime. What I've found is that it guarantees you that you will have success at the same or greater level than any of your other teams that are formed in a more traditional way. So that's why I'm definitely recommending that you spend some FaceTime at the front end during team building. But if you absolutely cannot pull your team together, then I would focus on the other areas around building cohesion to the best of your ability. I would throw in, though, because I have seen such great success with that initial 2-day team building session when you can draw people together. Many people think that they absolutely cannot afford that, and given the benefits long-term with the increased productivity and performance levels, although people think they can't afford it, I'd throw out, how can you not afford it if you look to the end result and the increased productivity? But I also understand that there are times when it simply is not an option. Well, let me see what's next here. How do you balance personalities on a team? For example, introverts, extroverts. Well, one of the great things about having a great setup around teams is that the strengths of each of the members come out through the step number 1 of building a resilient team. In the strengths assessment, we also like to have people fill out a strengths inventory, where if you're an extrovert, you would share with others your personal style, the fact that you're an extrovert. If you're an introvert, similarly, that you need to think about things before you would speak. And the best way to go about that would be to highlight the types of techniques that you could use. So, for example, somebody who's more extroverted may be comfortable with less preparation. They may come to a team meeting and be comfortable being called upon. Someone else might prefer to have some more preparatory time. But one thing that's great is by having your expectations clarified in the upfront foundation setting portion, you can lay all of that out, and each person understands the value of the other person within the team. And step 2 is all about clarifying expectations. And I think that any team that really functions effectively would equally value the personality mix on the team. They would find that the benefits of each of those, and a strong chairperson in the meeting would take the time to go around and play to the strengths of each of the members, allowing individuals to take their time, whether it's stopping and having small subgroups to think about various issues, and not using the same technique with each individual. See what's next here. I've got, what do you think about team charters, a kind of agreement team members agree on before the project starts? I completely agree with team charters. In fact, step 2 of our building a resilient team is exactly that. We call it a team mission statement, a clear set of goals, and a clear set of norms or team operating ground rules. A team charter is really a very similar type of thing that leads teams through clarifying where they're heading and how they want to get there. So this is a great idea and absolutely necessary before any team would begin working together. So it's completely in alignment with what I am talking about, and you should absolutely do that. In fact, many teams make the mistake of not moving forward with clarifying their expectations. And I'm just reading an additional question here. How do you address a situation where your manager trusts an employee who's a backstabber more than you? Oof. Well, that is something that we've probably all faced. And we meet people like that all the time, where our boss trusts our colleague more than they trust us or trust. Let me think about that for a minute. And how do you, I guess my immediate response to that is, why? You'd want to investigate. Is that other individual going to your boss, or what are they doing? The one danger in that situation is to run to your boss and say something. I would not do that. I think I would attempt in that case to continue to present a positive image of yourself to your boss rather than backstab yourself. You never want to get into that. You want to make sure that you try to build or continue to always stay on the up and up and build a positive relationship, highlighting your positive characteristics, and continue to build a positive relationship with your colleague as well. The one thing that would be, I think, the best way to get at that would be to go to that other employee and say something about the situation, confront that situation, looking for a positive resolution, and put the issue out with that individual to try to get that out in a productive way, rather than going to try to solve it, because chances are your boss will ask you first and foremost, what have you done to try to resolve it between the two of you first. Well, I see that we're actually at the end of our time, and I'd like to thank Neil and Shen for helping me out with today. They're my team today, so thank you very much. And most of all, I'd like to thank all of you, the many people who have joined me today and being a great support through the years. Many of you I see, and also in today's session, if you're joining us for the first, thank you so much, but thank you to everyone for joining, and please feel free to contact me anytime. I've provided my contact information if you have additional questions or if you think I can do anything to help you anytime. I look forward to hearing from you in the future. Thanks, everyone.